7 days in absolute darkness. No food, no light, just a name carved into the stone wall. Elizabeth Garrett, 1879, and three words beneath it. He killed me. And Rose realized she would be next. But what she didn't know was that a stranger, a man she'd never met, had just heard her scream. Before we begin, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from right now. And if you want more stories like this, hit that subscribe button. Now, let me tell you how I met your grandmother. The porch creaked beneath my boots as I settled into the old rocking chair, the Colorado sunset painting the mountains in shades of copper and gold. My grandson Henry Jr. sat cross-legged at my feet, his 12-year-old eyes wide with that particular hunger young boys have for stories of the old days. He had asked me the question I had been waiting 60 years to answer properly. How did you meet Grandma Rose? I looked past him toward the garden where the rose bushes grew thick and wild, their roots buried deep in soil that once held darker secrets. The wind carried the scent of pine and memory, and I felt the weight of 39 years of marriage settle warm in my chest. Let me tell you about the autumn of 1882. I said, my voice rough from years of shouting orders across open range. I was 26 years old, then fresh off burying both my parents to the fever back in Missouri. The West was still wild in those days, son. Men settled their differences with guns and an honor, and the law was whatever you could enforce with your own two hands. I paused, watching a hawk circle lazy patterns against the darkening sky. And I had to kill a man to save your grandmother's life. Henry Jr. leaned forward, and I began the story I had carried locked behind my teeth for all these years. Not because I was ashamed, but because some truths need the right moment to be spoken aloud. Missouri dirt has a particular smell when it is fresh, turned over a grave. I stood between two mounds of earth in September of 1882, my hat in my hands, watching the preacher's mouth move in prayers I could not hear over the roaring in my head. My mother had died on a Tuesday. My father followed her 3 days later, his body giving up the moment he realized she was gone. 26 years old, and I was alone in a world that suddenly felt too big and too empty. The farm sold quick. Land was worth something, even if the memories attached to it were worth nothing at all. I walked away with $750, a Winchester rifle, my father's Colt revolver, and a bone-deep need to be somewhere that did not remind me of death. Colorado territory called to men like me. The mountains promised clean air, and clean starts land cheap enough for a working man to afford in distance from everything that hurt. I bought a train ticket west and spent 3 days watching America roll past my window each mile, putting more space between me and the graves I would never visit again. The land office in Denver smelled like old paper and broken dreams. A clerk with ink-stained fingers showed me surveys of available properties, his voice a monotone recitation of acreage and water rights. I put my finger down on a plot without really looking at it. 160 acres in the Silver Pine Valley, 8 miles from town, with a creek the surveyor promised ran year-round. $15 an acre. The entire transaction took less than an hour. I walked out of that office with a deed in my pocket and a growing realization that I had just bought myself a life I had no idea how to live. A ranch needed more than one man. The work would be dawn to dusk and be on 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. Cattle needed tending, fences needed mending, fields needed plowing, and somewhere in between all that labor, a man needed to eat and sleep and maintain the kind of order that kept him from sliding into the dirt. I needed help. I needed a partner. I needed a wife. The idea came to me as I sat in a Denver boarding house staring at the classified section of the St. Louis Chronicle someone had left in the common room. The advertisements ran 3 columns deep: men seeking women, women seeking men, all of them strangers reaching across the distance for connection, for companionship, for someone to stand beside them against the loneliness of the frontier. Mail-order brides, they called them. It was common enough in those days, practical even. A man went west to build something. A woman back east needed an escape from poverty or cruelty or the suffocating restrictions of civilized society. They exchanged letters, made agreements, and met at train stations to begin lives built on pragmatism rather than romance. I had nothing against romance, mind you, but I had just buried my parents, and I was not fool enough to think I could find love in my current state. What I needed was someone steady, someone capable, someone willing to work beside me in building something that would last. I wrote the advertisement carefully, crossing out words and starting over half a dozen times before I got it right. Rancher 26 seeks honest woman for marriage. Must be strong, not afraid of hard work. Colorado territory. Wright O. Blackwood, care of Silver Pine Land Office. Short and to the point. No false promises, no flowery language. Just the truth laid bare for whoever might read it. I mailed it to 3 different newspapers back east and tried not to think about whether anyone would respond. Rose Catherine Hawthorne read my advertisement in a Boston boarding house on a gray September morning, and later she would tell me that my words were the first honest thing she had read in months. She was 23 years old that autumn, teaching children their letters in a school that paid her barely enough to cover her room and board. Her father had died in a mining accident when she was 10, crushed beneath Pennsylvania stone. Her mother had died bringing Rose into the world, leaving her an orphan raised by an aunt who viewed kindness as weakness and children as unpaid labor. Eleanor Hawthorne was 60 years old and mean as a snake. She had taken Rose in out of obligation rather than love, and she had spent the next 13 years making sure Rose understood the debt she owed. Rose worked from before dawn until after dark, cooking and cleaning and tending to an old woman's endless demands. The teaching job was supposed to be Rose's escape, but Eleanor took most of her wages as payment for room and board, leaving Rose with barely enough to buy herself a new dress once a year. Rose was trapped in a prison made of duty and family obligation, and she had begun to believe she would die in that house without ever knowing what it felt like to make her own choices. Then she found my advertisement tucked in the back pages of a newspaper someone had left at the schoolhouse. She told me later that she read it 7 times before she believed it was real. A man offering marriage and a home in exchange for partnership and honest work. No demands for beauty or breeding or the kind of soft refinement that came from never having to struggle. Just strength and willingness. Rose Hawthorne was strong, and she was more than willing. She wrote her reply by candlelight in her tiny room, her aunt snoring in the next room, her hand trembling as she formed the words that would change both our lives forever. Dear Mr. Blackwood, she wrote, I am 23 years old and I teach children at a school in Boston. I can cook and clean and manage a household. I am not afraid of hard work because I have known nothing but hard work my entire life. I do not know if I am strong enough for frontier life, but I know I am strong enough to try now. She paused the pen, hovering over the paper, and then added the line that would later make me fall in love with her before we ever met. I am not afraid of dying out west, she wrote. I am afraid of dying here without ever having lived. She signed it Rose Catherine Hawthorne and mailed it the next morning before her courage could fail. Her letter reached me 2 weeks later at the Silver Pine Land Office, forwarded from Denver. I stood in the dusty street reading her words, the October wind cold enough to make my eyes water, and I felt something shift in my chest. This woman, this stranger, had just told me the truth about herself in a way most people never manage in a lifetime of knowing someone. I wrote back that same day. Miss Hawthorne, I wrote, thank you for your honest letter. I will be equally honest in return. I am not a rich man, and this will not be an easy life. The ranch is small and needs considerable work. The winters are harsh, and the summers are unforgiving. You will be far from civilization and far from anything you have known. But I promise you this, I will treat you with respect. I will never raise my hand to you in anger. I will work beside you as a partner, not command you as property. And I will do everything in my power to build a life worth living. I paused, then added the question that needed asking. Can you shoot a gun? The frontier can be dangerous, and I need to know you can defend yourself if necessary. I also need to know if you are afraid of loneliness. There will be days when you see no one but me, weeks even during the winter months. Some women find that solitude peaceful. Others find it unbearable. I need you to tell me which you are. I sealed the letter and sent it east, and then I began the work of preparing my new ranch for a wife I had never met. Rose's second letter arrived 3 weeks later, and this time there was steel beneath the ink. Mr. Blackwood, she wrote, I have never fired a gun, but I am willing to learn. I spent my childhood in mining camps where danger was commonplace, and I learned early that fear is less dangerous than helplessness. Teach me to shoot, and I will learn. As for loneliness, I have been lonely in rooms full of people. I have been lonely in a house with my own blood relative. I do not think empty land could be lonelier than that. At least the mountains will not judge me for wanting something better. She asked me one question in return. Are you kind? I stared at those three words for a long time. Are you kind? Not, are you successful? Not, are you handsome? Not, are you going to make me rich? Just kind. As if that was the one thing that mattered above all else. I wrote back immediately. I try to be, I said. I fail sometimes because I am human and flawed. But I believe a man who hurts those weaker than himself is no man at all. I believe in keeping my word even when it costs me. And I believe that kindness is not the same as weakness. If you come west to marry me, I will be kind to you every day for the rest of my life. That is a promise I can keep. I enclosed $50 for train fare and gave her the address of the Silver Pine Land Office. Meet me there on October 15th, I wrote. If you change your mind, keep the money and use it for something that brings you joy. You owe me nothing. But if you come, I will be waiting. I mailed the letter and tried to ignore the way my hands shook as I dropped it in the box. Rose Hawthorne left Boston on October 8th with a single carpetbag and a heart full of hope she was afraid to acknowledge. She told her aunt she was visiting a friend in Philadelphia. She walked out of that house knowing she would never return, and she felt no guilt about the lie. The train carried her west through landscapes that grew progressively wilder and more beautiful. She watched cities give way to towns, towns give way to settlements, settlements give way to nothing but land and scum. She slept sitting upright in hard seats, ate bread and cheese she had packed herself, and tried not to think too hard about what she was doing. She was traveling across a continent to marry a stranger based on 3 letters in a desperate need to escape. It was either the bravest thing she had ever done or the most foolish, and she would not know which until she arrived. The train pulled into Silver Pine on October 15th at 2 in the afternoon, and Rose stepped onto the platform with her carpetbag in one hand and her heart hammering against her ribs. The town was smaller than she had imagined, just a collection of weathered buildings huddled against the approaching winter. Smoke rose from chimneys into a pale sky, and somewhere in the distance she could hear the sound of hammers on wood. She looked around for Owen Blackwood, her eyes searching the handful of people on the platform. A rancher 26, he had written. That could be any of the men she saw. She had no idea what he looked like, had never even thought to ask. Then a man stepped forward from the shadow of the station house, and Rose's blood turned to ice. He was older than 26, easily in his 50s, well-dressed in expensive clothes that looked out of place in this rough town. His hair was iron gray, and his face might have been handsome once, but there was something cold in his eyes that made Rose want to step back. Miss Hawthorne, he said, and his voice was smooth as oil. I am Marcus Garrett, Owen Blackwood's neighbor. I am afraid Owen has been delayed in Denver. A horse threw him, and he is recovering from his injuries. He asked me to bring you to his ranch and make you comfortable until he returns. Rose felt every instinct she had screaming at her to refuse to turn around and get back on the train to run. But she was alone in a strange town with less than $5 in her purse and nowhere else to go. And this man knew her name, knew she was supposed to meet Owen Blackwood, knew details he could not have known unless he was telling the truth. She looked around for someone else to ask, someone to confirm this story, but the platform was emptying fast. The only other person nearby was the station clerk, an older man who reeked of whiskey and would not meet her eyes. I appreciate your help, Mr. Garrett, Rose said carefully, but perhaps I should wait here for Mr. Blackwood. I would not want to impose on your hospitality. Marcus Garrett smiled, and it did not reach his eyes. Nonsense, he said. Owen specifically asked me to see to your comfort. My ranch is just a short ride from here. You can rest, have a proper meal, and be ready when Owen arrives. He should be back within the week. He reached for her carpetbag before she could protest, his grip firm on the handle. Rose found herself being guided toward a waiting wagon, her objections dying in her throat as she realized she had no other options. She climbed into the wagon and tried to ignore the way her skin crawled as Marcus Garrett settled into the seat beside her. The ride to the ranch took less than an hour, but it felt like a lifetime. Marcus kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the valley, but Rose barely heard him. She was watching the landscape, marking the route in her mind, looking for anything that might help her if she needed to find her way back to town. The ranch Marcus brought her to was impressive in a way that made Rose's unease deepen. This was not the small, struggling operation Owen had described in his letters. This was wealth established and comfortable. The main house was large and well-maintained, surrounded by outbuildings that spoke of years of prosperity. "This is Owen's ranch," Rose asked, and even to her own ears, her voice sounded doubtful. Marcus helped her down from the wagon with a hand that lingered too long on her arm. "Of course," he said. "Come inside. You must be exhausted from your journey." The house was dim, inside the curtains drawn against the afternoon light. Marcus led her to a sitting room and gestured for her to take a seat. Rose perched on the edge of a chair, her carpetbag clutched in her lap, every muscle in her body tense. "Let me get you something to eat," Marcus said, and disappeared down a hallway. Rose sat alone in the silent house and fought the urge to run. She had nowhere to run to. She had no money, no friends, no way of knowing where Owen Blackwood's actual ranch was, or even if he existed. She was completely at the mercy of a man whose eyes made her think of snakes. Marcus returned with bread and cheese on a tray, along with a cup of tea that steamed in the cool air. He set it on the table beside her and settled into a chair across from her, watching her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Eat," he said. "You look half-starved." Rose took a piece of bread but could not bring herself to eat it. The silence stretched between them, heavy and oppressive, until finally she could not stand it anymore. "When did you say Mr. Blackwood would return?" she asked. Marcus smiled, and there was nothing kind in that smile. "I did not," he said. Rose felt her stomach drop. "I beg your pardon." Marcus leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes locked on hers. "Owen Blackwood will not be meeting you today, Miss Hawthorne. You see, the clerk at the land office owes me a considerable sum. He showed me all of Blackwood's correspondence, including the letters from a Miss Rose Catherine Hawthorne of Boston. I know you were to meet him here today. I know he wrote that his departure from Missouri was delayed by matters with his parents' estate. He will not arrive for at least another week, perhaps longer." Rose stood up, her carpetbag falling to the floor. "Then why did you tell me he sent you? Why did you bring me here?" Marcus stood as well, and suddenly the room felt very small. "Because I saw an opportunity," he said calmly. "A beautiful young woman traveling alone to marry a man she has never met. A man who will not arrive for days yet. A woman with no one to protect her and nowhere else to go." Rose backed toward the door, her mind racing. She had been so foolish, so desperate to believe in the promise of Owen's letters, that she had walked straight into a trap. "I am leaving," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Right now." Marcus moved faster than she expected, stepping between her and the door. "I do not think so," he said. "You came here looking for a husband, Miss Hawthorne, and you have found one. Me." Rose tried to run. She grabbed her carpetbag and lunged for the door, but Marcus caught her arm and yanked her back. She opened her mouth to scream, and he clamped a hand over her face, his other arm pinning her against his chest. "You can make this easy or you can make this hard," he hissed in her ear. "But you are going to stay here until you agree to marry me. And if that takes days or weeks or months, so be it. I have all the time in the world." Rose bit down on his palm as hard as she could, tasting blood. Marcus roared and threw her away from him. She hit the floor hard, her head cracking against the wooden planks, and the world went gray at the edges. Through the haze of pain, she felt Marcus grab her by the arms and drag her. She tried to fight, tried to scream, but her body would not respond. There were stairs descending into darkness, cold air and the smell of damp earth, and then nothing. Rose woke in absolute darkness, her head pounding and her body aching. She was lying on cold stone, a thin blanket, the only thing between her and the ground. She sat up slowly, her hands exploring the space around her, trying to understand where she was. A cellar. She was in a cellar. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the darkness, and she could make out the faint outline of stairs leading up to a door. She stumbled toward them, her legs unsteady, and pushed against the door with all her strength. It did not budge. There was the rattle of chain on the other side, the solid resistance of a lock. She was trapped. Rose sank down on the stairs and tried not to panic. There had to be a way out. There had to be someone who would miss her, someone who would come looking. But even as she thought it, she knew the truth. No one knew where she was. The aunt she had lied to thought she was in Philadelphia. Owen Blackwood thought she had changed her mind about coming. The station clerk had been drunk and would remember nothing. She was alone in the dark with a man who meant her harm, and no one was coming to save her. Hours passed, or maybe days. In the absolute darkness of the cellar, time lost all meaning. Rose explored every inch of her prison, feeling along the walls for weaknesses, finding nothing but solid stone. There was a bucket in one corner for her needs and a clay jug of water that was already half empty. A single loaf of bread, hard and stale. She tried shouting for help until her voice gave out, but the walls were thick and she was underground. No one could hear her screams. On what might have been the second day, Marcus came down the stairs. He brought a candle that seemed blindingly bright after so much darkness, and Rose shrank back against the wall, her eyes watering. "Have you reconsidered my proposal?" he asked pleasantly, as if he were asking about the weather. Rose forced herself to meet his eyes. "I will never marry you," she said. "Never," Marcus shrugged. "Then you will stay down here until you change your mind. I am a patient man, Miss Hawthorne, and I have nowhere else to be." He left the bread and water, took the candle, and climbed back up the stairs. The door closed and the darkness returned, absolute and suffocating. The days blurred together. Marcus came every few days, always with the same question, always leaving with the same answer. Rose grew weaker, the hunger a constant gnawing in her belly, the cold seeping into her bones. She rationed the water, made the bread last as long as she could, and tried to hold on to hope. On what she thought was the seventh day, she found the carving. Her fingers had been exploring the wall near the stairs, searching for any crack or weakness, when they brushed against marks in the stone. Deliberate marks carved deep. She traced them in the darkness, her heart pounding, and spelled out the letters one by one. Elizabeth Garrett, 1879. And below it in smaller letters, as if carved with the last of someone's strength: "He killed me. Do not trust him." Rose's hands shook as she traced the name again and again. Elizabeth Garrett, Marcus's wife. The woman Marcus claimed had died of illness 3 years ago. She had not died of illness. She had died down here in this cellar, locked away and forgotten. And Rose understood with terrible clarity that Marcus intended the same fate for her if she did not give him what he wanted. She started screaming again that night, not for Marcus, but for anyone who might hear. She screamed until her voice was nothing but a raw whisper, and then she kept screaming anyway because the alternative was giving up. And Rose Catherine Hawthorne had not traveled across a continent just to die in the dark. I had no idea any of this was happening. I arrived in Silver Pine on October 22nd, 7 days late and exhausted from a journey that should have taken half the time. A derailment in Kansas had left me stranded for 3 days while they cleared the tracks and repaired the damage. By the time I finally reached Colorado, I was dirty and hungry and desperate to reach my new land. The Silver Pine land office was closed when I arrived, so I went straight to the station to ask about Rose. The clerk, Ezra Pike, looked at me with bleary eyes and shook his head. "No woman came asking for you, Blackwood," he said. "Nobody by that name on any manifest I saw." My heart sank. She had changed her mind. After everything, after the letters and the promises and the hope, I had not let myself acknowledge Rose Hawthorne had decided not to come. I tried not to let the disappointment show as I hired a wagon to take me out to my ranch. The driver, a taciturn man who spoke little, pointed out the neighboring property as we passed. "That is the Garrett place," he said. "Marcus Garrett owns it. Keeps to himself mostly. Lost his wife a few years back and has not been right since." I noted the name and the large ranch house that looked dark even in the afternoon light, and then forgot about it as my own property came into view. The ranch was small but solid, exactly as the survey had promised. The house needed work, but it was well built. The barn was weathered but functional. There was a creek running through the eastern portion of the land, the water clear and cold. It was mine, all of it. I paid the driver and spent the rest of the daylight hours exploring my new home, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in my chest where hope had been. I had been ready to share this with someone, had started to imagine what it would be like to have Rose Hawthorne beside me, building something worth keeping. But she had not come, and I would have to build it alone. I made a cold camp that first night, too tired to bother with more than coffee and hardtack. I sat on the porch of my new house and watched the stars come out over the mountains, and I tried to convince myself that this was enough, that I was enough. I fell asleep sometime near midnight, exhausted enough that even the hard floor felt comfortable, and then at 2 a.m. I heard the scream. It jolted me awake like a gunshot, my hand reaching for the Winchester before my eyes were fully open. I stood in the darkness, my heart hammering, straining to hear past the pounding of blood in my ears. Nothing. Just the wind and the settling sounds of an old house adjusting to the cold. Then it came again, fainter this time, almost swallowed by distance, but unmistakably human. A woman's voice, hoarse and desperate, calling for help, and it was coming from the direction of the Garrett Ranch. I pulled on my boots and coat, grabbed my rifle and a lantern, and headed out into the freezing darkness. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the frost-covered ground. My breath misted in the air as I moved as quietly as I could toward the neighboring property. Every instinct I had honed during years of night watches told me something was very wrong. That cry had been too raw, too filled with genuine terror to be anything innocent. I approached the Garrett house cautiously, watching for any sign of movement. The place looked even more desolate in the moonlight, its grand facade gone to seed. No light showed in any windows. No smoke rose from the chimneys despite the brutal cold. I circled the house slowly, my rifle ready, trying to locate the source of the sound. I was about to conclude I had imagined it when I heard it again, clearer now that I was closer. "Help me, please. Somebody help me." The voice was coming from below ground level, from a cellar. I found the entrance on the north side of the house, a pair of angled wooden doors set into the ground like a storm shelter. And wrapped around the handles was a heavy chain secured with a padlock that gleamed new and silver in the moonlight. I set down my lantern and examined the setup more closely, my jaw tightening with each detail I noticed. This was not just a locked cellar. This was a prison. "Hello," I called out, keeping my voice low but clear. "Is someone down there?" The response was immediate, a scrambling sound, then a woman's voice, hoarse from screaming but filled with desperate hope. "Yes, please, I have been here for days. Please help me." I knelt beside the doors, my mind racing. "What is your name?" There was a pause and then the answer that would change everything. "Rose Hawthorne. My name is Rose Hawthorne." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. Rose. My Rose. The mail-order bride who I thought had changed her mind was locked in a cellar not 100 yards from my own property. "Rose," I said, and my voice came out rougher than I intended. "This is Owen Blackwood. I am going to get you out of there. Hold on." "Owen." Her voice broke on my name. "Oh God, Owen. He said you were not here yet. He said you would not come." "Who said that? Who locked you down there, Marcus Garrett?" "He brought me here from the train station. He has been keeping me prisoner." Rage flooded through me, white hot and blinding. I wanted to break down Marcus's door and put a bullet in him right then and there, but I forced myself to think clearly. Rose needed me calm and focused, not reckless. I could shoot off the padlock, but the noise would wake Garrett if he was home. Instead, I ran back to my own ranch and grabbed the bolt cutters I had packed among my tools. By the time I returned to the cellar, the eastern sky was just beginning to lighten with the first hint of dawn. The bolt cutters made short work of the chain, though the metal shrieked in protest. I yanked the doors open and raised my lantern, peering down into the darkness. A woman stood at the bottom of a rough wooden staircase, one hand shielding her eyes against the sudden light. She was painfully thin, her dress hanging off her frame. Her dark hair fell in tangled waves past her shoulders, and even from this distance, I could see she was trembling. "Come on up," I said gently. "You are safe now." She climbed the stairs slowly, like someone who was not quite sure her legs would support her. When she reached the top and stepped out into the pre-dawn light, I got my first clear look at Rose Catherine Hawthorne. She was younger than I had imagined, maybe 23 or 24. Her features would have been beautiful if not for the gauntness of hunger and the dark circles under her eyes. But it was her eyes themselves that caught me, green as new grass and filled with more fear and determination than I had ever seen in another human being. "Thank you," she whispered, and her voice cracked. "Thank you. I thought I was going to die down there." I shrugged off my coat and draped it around her shoulders. She was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. "You are Rose Hawthorne," I had to ask, had to be sure this was real. She nodded, pulling my coat tight around herself. "And you are really Owen Blackwood." "I am." Her eyes filled with tears and she swayed on her feet. I caught her before she could fall, and after a moment's hesitation, I simply picked her up. She weighed almost nothing, her body light as a child's in my arms. "My ranch is right next door," I said. "I have food and a fire. Can you hold on a little longer?" She nodded against my shoulder, too exhausted for words. I carried her across the frost-covered ground to my property, and with every step I took, my rage at Marcus Garrett grew colder and harder. This man had locked a woman in a cellar for 7 days. He had starved her and terrorized her and left her to die in the dark. And he was going to answer for it, But first, I needed to take care of Rose. Inside my house, I settled Rose in the chair closest to the fireplace and built up the fire until heat filled the room. She sat wrapped in my coat, still shaking her eyes, following my movements, like she was afraid I might disappear if she looked away. I heated water for tea and made a simple breakfast of eggs and bread, watching as she ate with the desperate hunger of someone who had been starving. I had to stop her from eating too quickly, knowing her stomach would rebel after so long there with so little. Easy, I said gently, placing my hand over hers. Small bites. Your body needs time to remember how to handle food. She nodded and forced herself to slow down, tears streaming silently down her face as she ate. I looked away to give her privacy, stoking the fire and trying to process what had happened. Rose Hawthorne had come west to marry me, had been intercepted by my neighbor, and had spent 7 days locked in a cellar because she refused to marry her captor. 7 days in the dark, 7 days of cold and hunger and terror. And I had been late, 7 days late. If the train had not derailed, if I had arrived on schedule, none of this would have happened. I am sorry, I said quietly. I should have been there to meet you. Rose looked up at me, her green eyes startling in her pale face. You could not have known, she said. The train accident was not your fault. Still, you came all this way to meet me, and I failed you. She set down her cup with hands that still trembled slightly. You saved me, Owen. You heard me when no one else did. You came in the dark and broke me out of that hell. You did not fail me. The way she said my name like it was something precious made my chest tighten. Tell me what happened, I said. All of it. So she did. She told me about arriving at the station and being approached by Marcus Garrett, about his lies and how he had brought her to his ranch under false pretenses, about waking up in the cellar in the days that followed. Her voice only broke once when she told me about finding Elizabeth Garrett's name carved into the wall. He killed his wife, she said, down in that cellar, and he was going to do the same to me if I did not agree to marry him. I felt my hands curl into fists, the rage I had been holding back threatening to break free. Marcus Garrett had not just imprisoned Rose, he was a murderer, and he had intended to make Rose his next victim. We need to go to the sheriff, I said. Tell him what happened. Get Marcus arrested. Rose shook her head, and I saw something hard and bitter in her expression. And tell him what? That my stepfather disciplined his disobedient ward. Marcus will claim I came to work for him, that I ran away, that you helped me escape. He is wealthy and established. You just arrived. Who do you think they will believe? She had a point. Justice in the West was often less about law and more about power and influence. A newcomer with a single ranch would have little weight against a man like Marcus Garrett. Then what do you want to do? I asked. Rose met my eyes and I saw steel beneath the exhaustion. I want to marry you, right now, today. Once I am legally your wife, Marcus cannot touch me. He will have no claim on me at all. Are you sure I do not want you to feel forced into this because of what happened? I am not being forced, Rose said firmly. I came west to marry you, Owen Blackwood. That has not changed. The only thing that has changed is that now I know exactly what kind of man you are. You are the kind who breaks chains and carries strangers to safety. You are the kind who keeps his promises even when it costs him. I would be honored to be your wife. Then we need to move quickly, I said, before Marcus realizes you are gone. We rode into Silver Pine within the hour. I gave Rose my mother's spare dress to wear, the one I had packed, thinking I might need it someday, but not knowing why. It fit her well enough, though she had to cinch the belt tight around her thin waist. The town was just waking up when we arrived, shopkeepers opening their doors and sweeping their stoops. I took Rose straight to the office of Judge Hiram Cole, the circuit judge, who happened to be in town that week. Judge Cole was 68 years old with a face like weathered leather and eyes that missed nothing. He looked at Rose with her hollowed cheeks and the bruises on her arms, then looked at me with open suspicion. Mr. Blackwood, he said slowly, this young lady looks like she has been through an ordeal. You want to tell me what is going on here? I opened my mouth to explain, but Rose spoke first. Judge Cole, my name is Rose Catherine Hawthorne. I traveled from Boston to marry Mr. Blackwood. We have been corresponding for weeks. I have the letters to prove it. When I arrived in Silver Pine 7 days ago, I was intercepted by a man named Marcus Garrett, who claimed he was acting on Mr. Blackwood's behalf. He brought me to his ranch and locked me in his cellar when I refused to marry him instead. Mr. Blackwood rescued me this morning. We are here to complete the marriage we agreed to before I left Boston." The judge's eyebrows rose. "That is quite a story, Miss Hawthorne." "It is the truth," Rose said, "and I have proof." She produced the 3 letters I had sent her, still carefully folded in her carpet bag. Judge Cole read them slowly, his expression growing darker with each page. "These are genuine," he said finally. "The handwriting matches, the details are consistent. And you say Marcus Garrett imprisoned you for 7 days." Rose confirmed, "In a cellar beneath his house, without adequate food or water. He told me he would keep me there until I agreed to become his wife." "Those are serious accusations," the judge said. "They are the truth," Rose replied. Judge Cole studied her for a long moment, then turned to me. "Mr. Blackwood, are you certain you want to marry this woman? You have known her less than a day." "I have known her through her letters for weeks," I said. "I know she is brave and honest and strong. That is enough for me." "And you, Miss Hawthorne," the judge asked, "are you being coerced into this marriage?" "No, sir," Rose said firmly. "I want to marry Owen Blackwood. I wanted to marry him before Marcus Garrett ever touched me." "That has not changed." Judge Cole nodded slowly. "All right then. But I want to speak with you privately first, Miss Hawthorne, to make absolutely certain you understand what you are agreeing to." He took Rose into his back office and closed the door. I waited in the outer room, my hands clenched together, trying not to imagine what she might be saying. What if she was having second thoughts? What if the reality of marrying a stranger was too much now that she was actually here? The door opened after what felt like an eternity, and Rose emerged with Judge Cole behind her. "She wants to proceed," the judge said, "so let us get this done." We were halfway through the ceremony when Marcus Garrett burst through the door. He looked wild, his hair disheveled, and his eyes blazing with fury. He must have discovered Rose was gone and ridden hard to reach town before we could complete the marriage. "Stop this," he demanded. "Rose Hawthorne is mine. She agreed to come to my ranch. She agreed to be my wife." I stepped between Marcus and Rose, my hand moving toward the Colt at my hip. "She agreed to nothing," I said quietly. "You imprisoned her. You starved her. You threatened her. And now you are going to answer for it." Marcus laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Answer to who? You? A drifter who just arrived in town? I am Marcus Garrett. I own half this valley. My word means something here." Judge Cole stepped forward, his voice hard as iron. "Your word means nothing if you are a kidnapper, Garrett. Miss Hawthorne has testified that you held her against her will. She has physical evidence of abuse, and she has letters proving she came here to marry Mr. Blackwood, not you." Marcus's face darkened. "This is a misunderstanding." Rose was confused. "I was trying to help her." "By locking her in a cellar?" the judge asked. The room went very quiet. Marcus looked around, seeming to realize for the first time that he was losing this battle. His eyes landed on Rose, and I saw something desperate and dangerous flash across his face. "Rose," he said, his voice suddenly soft and pleading, "please, you do not have to do this. I can give you so much more than this, nobody rancher. Come back with me. We can forget all of this ever happened." Rose stepped out from behind me, her chin lifted high, despite the fear I could see in her eyes. "I would rather die than go anywhere with you," she said clearly. "You are a monster, Marcus Garrett, and I pray that someday you will face justice for what you did to your wife, for what you did to Elizabeth." Marcus went pale. For just a moment, the mask slipped and I saw the killer beneath. Then he regained control, his face smoothing into cold indifference. "You will regret this," he said quietly. "Both of you, is that a threat?" Mr. Garrett, Judge Cole asked. Marcus did not answer. He turned and walked out, leaving the door swinging open behind him. "I think you had better finish this ceremony quickly," Judge Cole said. "And then I think you two had better be very careful." We spoke our vows with the door still open and the cold wind blowing through. I slipped my mother's gold ring onto Rose's finger, and she looked at it like I had given her the moon. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Judge Cole said. "May God have mercy on you both." I kissed Rose for the first time right there in the judge's office, and despite everything that had happened, despite the danger we were still in, I felt something settle into place in my chest. This woman was mine now, and I was hers, and whatever came next, we would face it together. We rode back to the ranch in silence, both of us watching the road behind us for signs of pursuit. But Marcus did not follow, at least not yet. When we reached my small house, I helped Rose down from the wagon, and we stood for a moment just looking at each other. "This is your home now," I said, "for as long as you want it to be." Rose looked at the humble ranch house, at the weathered barn, and the frost-covered fields and smiled. It was the first real smile I had seen from her, and it transformed her face. "It is perfect," she said. That night, I gave Rose the main bedroom and took the smaller room for myself. I wanted her to know she was safe here, that I would not take advantage of the situation we found ourselves in. We were married in the eyes of the law, but that did not mean I had the right to demand anything from her. But as I lay in the narrow bed in the spare room, I heard Rose's door open. Soft footsteps crossed the floor, and then she was standing in my doorway, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "Owen," she whispered, "I cannot sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I am back in that cellar." I sat up immediately. "What do you need?" "Can I stay in here just for tonight? I just need to know I am not alone." "Of course," I said, and moved over to make room for her in the small bed. Rose climbed in beside me, careful to maintain a respectful distance. We lay in the darkness, not touching, just listening to each other breathe. "Thank you," she said after a long silence. "For everything. For answering my letter. For coming to find me. For marrying me even though I brought nothing but trouble to your door." "You did not bring trouble," I said. "Marcus Garrett did, and he is going to pay for it." I felt her shift beside me. "How, I do not know yet, but I promise you this, Rose. I will never let him hurt you again." She reached out in the darkness and found my hand, her fingers twining with mine. "I believe you," she said. We fell asleep like that, hands linked, and for the first time in 7 days, Rose slept without nightmares. The next morning, Marcus made his first move. I woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of horses screaming. I bolted out of bed and ran outside to find the barn engulfed in flames, orange light dancing against the pre-dawn sky. Rose appeared beside me, already pulling on her boots. "The cattle," she said. "We have to get them out." We ran toward the burning barn together. The heat was intense, the smoke choking. I managed to get the door open and drive out 4 of the 6 cows, but 2 were already dead, overcome by smoke before we could reach them. Rose and I fought the fire with buckets of water from the creek, but it was hopeless. By the time the flames died down, the barn was a blackened skeleton, and 2 of my cattle were dead. I walked through the ruins as the sun rose, looking for anything that might tell me how the fire started. That was when I found it. A broken whiskey bottle near the back wall, the glass still smelling of kerosene, and in the soft dirt beside it, a boot print, large with a distinctive heel pattern. Not mine, and not Rose's. I recognized that pattern. I had seen it the day before when Marcus Garrett had stormed into Judge Cole's office. "He did this," Rose said quietly, coming to stand beside me. "He burned your barn." "I know. What are we going to do?" I looked at the ruins of my barn, at my dead cattle, at my wife standing beside me with her chin raised in defiance despite the fear in her eyes. "I am going to have a conversation with Marcus Garrett," I said. I saddled my horse and rode to the Garrett Ranch alone despite Rose's protests. Some things a man had to handle himself. Marcus was waiting for me on his front porch, a shotgun across his lap. He smiled when he saw me approach, and it was the smile of a man who thought he held all the cards. "Blackwood," he said pleasantly. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" I dismounted slowly, keeping my hands visible. The Colt was at my hip, but I was not here for a gunfight. Not yet. "My barn burned last night," I said, "and I found evidence that it was arson." "How unfortunate," Marcus said, his tone suggesting it was anything but. "These old wooden structures are such fire hazards. I found your boot print in the ashes." His smile widened. "I imagine a lot of men around here wear boots similar to mine. You would have a hard time proving anything." I stepped closer, close enough that I could see the malice in his eyes. "You listen to me, Garrett. If you come near my wife or my property again, I will kill you, not arrest you, not take you to court. I will put a bullet in you myself. Do you understand?" Marcus stood up slowly, the shotgun dangling from one hand. "That sounds like a threat, Blackwood." "It is a promise." We stood there staring at each other, 2 men with murder in their hearts, separated only by the thin veneer of civilization. Finally, Marcus laughed. "You are out of your depth, boy. I have been playing this game since before you were born." You think you can threaten me and walk away? You think you can steal what is mine and not pay the price? Rose was never yours, I said, and she never will be. I mounted my horse and rode away, feeling Marcus's eyes on my back the whole way. I knew this was not over. I had thrown down the gauntlet, and Marcus would respond. The only question was when and how. Rose was waiting for me on the porch when I got back, a rifle in her hands. Did you kill him? She asked. Number. Why not? Because I need him to come at me first, I said. When I kill Marcus Garrett, it is going to be self-defense. I am not going to hang for putting down a rabid dog. Rose looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Then we need to be ready, she said, because he is going to come. Soon. She was right. The next few days were tense, both of us waiting for Marcus's next move. I spent the time teaching Rose how to shoot. She had never held a gun before, but she learned quickly. By the end of the third day, she could hit a tin can at 30 yards with my Winchester. That is my girl, I said, and felt a surge of pride watching her handle the rifle with growing confidence. November came with the first real snow, and with it came a shift in the dynamic between Rose and me. We were still strangers in many ways, still learning each other's habits and rhythms. But we were also partners, working side by side to rebuild the barn and prepare for winter. I would catch her watching me sometimes when she thought I was not looking. And I found myself doing the same, memorizing the way she moved, the sound of her laugh, the determined set of her jaw when she tackled a difficult task. One evening a week after the barn fire, we sat by the fireplace after supper. Rose was mending one of my shirts, her needle moving with practiced efficiency. I was carving a small wooden box, something I had started without really knowing why. What are you making? Rose asked. I do not know yet, I admitted. My hands just needed something to do. She smiled. My mother used to say that idle hands were the devil's workshop. But I think sometimes our hands know what we need before our heads do. I looked at the half-formed box in my hands and realized I was making it for her. A place for her to keep the letters I had written, the few precious things she had brought from Boston. A box that said, "This is your home, you belong here. It is for you," I said. For your letters and whatever else you want to keep safe. Rose's eyes filled with tears. Owen, you do not have to do that. I want to, I said. You came all this way with nothing but a carpet bag and your courage. You deserve to have something that is just yours. She set down her sewing and came to sit beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her body. I already have something that is mine, she said softly. I have you. The box fell from my hands as I turned to look at her. She was so close I could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, could feel her breath against my face. Rose, I started, but I did not know how to finish. She kissed me, just leaned forward and pressed her lips to mine, soft and tentative and perfect. I froze for a heartbeat, then kissed her back, my hands coming up to cup her face gently. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. I have wanted to do that since you carried me out of that cellar, Rose whispered. I have wanted to do that since I read your first letter, I confessed. She laughed, and the sound filled something in me I had not known was empty. We are married, she said. We are allowed to kiss. We are allowed to do more than kiss, I pointed out. Rose's cheeks flushed, but she did not look away. I know, but I need you to know that when we do, it will not be because I owe you. It will not be out of obligation or gratitude. It will be because I choose you. I choose you too, I said. And I will wait as long as you need. She kissed me again, deeper this time, and I felt her hands slide into my hair. I do not want to wait, she said against my lips. I have spent my whole life waiting for someone to see me, to choose me, to want me for who I am instead of what I can do for them. You did that, Owen, from the very first letter, so I do not want to wait anymore. I stood up and held out my hand to her. She took it without hesitation, and I led her to the bedroom we had been sharing for the past few nights, the one that was starting to feel like ours rather than just mine. What followed was tender and awkward and perfect in the way first times often are. We learned each other slowly with patience and care, and when we finally came together, it felt like a promise being kept. A vow spoken in the language of touch and breath and heartbeat. Afterward, Rose lay with her head on my chest, her fingers tracing idle patterns on my skin. I love you, she said quietly. I know it is too soon, and I know we barely know each other. But I love you, Owen Blackwood. I love you too, I said and meant it with everything in me. We fell asleep tangled together, and for a few hours the world outside ceased to matter. But Marcus Garrett was not done with us. December brought brutal cold and the first major snowstorm of the season. We were snowed in for 3 days, and when the storm finally passed, we emerged to find ourselves buried under 3 feet of fresh powder. I was shoveling out the path to the new barn when I heard the horses. 3 riders coming up the road moving fast. I grabbed my rifle and called for Rose to stay inside. But she came out anyway, her own rifle in hand, and stood beside me as the riders approached. They were strangers, hard-looking men with guns on their hips and mean eyes. The kind of men who did violence for money and did not ask questions about why. Owen Blackwood, the lead rider, asked. He was older than the other two, maybe 35, with a scar running down his left cheek. Who is asking? I replied, my finger near the trigger of my Winchester. Name's Jack Boone, the man said. But people call me Rattlesnake. This here is my brother Billy and our associate Samuel Creek. We have been hired to deliver a message. What message? Jack smiled, showing teeth gone brown from tobacco. That your wife needs to come back where she belongs. And if she does not, well, accidents happen. Barns burn, cattle die, people disappear in the winter, and nobody finds them until spring thaw. Rose stepped forward, her rifle pointed straight at Jack's chest. I belong right here, she said clearly. And if you think you can threaten us, you are going to find out exactly how wrong you are. Jack's smile widened. She has spirit. I will give her that. But spirit does not stop bullets, little lady. The situation was balanced on a knife edge. 3 men against 2, but Rose and I had the high ground and the element of surprise on our side. If shooting started, people were going to die. The question was, who would die first? I think you boys should ride on, I said quietly. Tell Marcus Garrett that Rose is my wife now, legally, properly, and permanently. And if he wants her back, he is going to have to kill me first. Billy Creek, the younger brother, laughed. That can be arranged. His hand moved toward his gun, and I shot him. The Winchester barked once, and Billy went down, clutching his shoulder and screaming. Jack and Samuel froze their hands well away from their weapons. The next one who moves gets it in the chest instead of the shoulder, I said. Now get your friend and ride out. And you tell Marcus that if he sends anyone else after us, I will come for him personally. Jack dismounted slowly and helped Billy onto his horse. Blood was streaming down the younger man's arm, but the wound was not fatal. I had aimed carefully, wanting to send a message without committing murder. This is not over, Blackwood, Jack said as he mounted up. Yes, it is, I replied. You just do not know it yet. They rode off, Billy's curses fading into the distance. Rose lowered her rifle, her hands shaking. You shot him, she said. I had to, I replied. He was going for his gun. It was him or us. She turned to me and I expected to see fear or horror or disgust. Instead, I saw fierce pride. You protected us, she said. Thank you. That night, as we lay in bed, Rose asked the question I had been dreading. What are we going to do about Marcus? I do not know. I admitted he is not going to stop. Men like him, they do not know how to let go. He will keep coming at us until one of us is dead. Then we kill him first, Rose said simply. I looked at her in surprise. Rose, I cannot just murder a man. Even a man who tried to kill you, who locked me in a cellar, who burned our barn and sent hired guns after us. There has to be another way. What way? The law will not touch him. He is too rich, too powerful, and we cannot just keep waiting for him to make the next move. She was right and I knew it, but the thought of cold-blooded murder went against everything I believed in. Let me think on it, I said, but Rose had planted the seed and it grew in the darkness of my mind. How far was I willing to go to protect my wife? What lines was I willing to cross? I would find out soon enough. The answer came 2 days later when I came back from checking the cattle to find our front door open and Rose gone. There was no sign of struggle, but Rose's rifle was still in the house. She had been taken by surprise, grabbed before she could defend herself, and I knew exactly who had taken her. I rode to Marcus Garrett's ranch like the devil himself was chasing me, my Colt loaded and my heart full of murder. If he had hurt her, if he had laid one finger on her, I was going to kill him and damn the consequences. But when I reached the Garrett ranch, I found it empty. The house was dark, the barn quiet. There was no sign of Rose, no sign of Marcus. Then I heard it, a faint sound coming from the direction of the cellar. The same cellar where Rose had been imprisoned before. I ran to the doors and found them chained shut again, a new padlock gleaming in the afternoon sun, and from below I could hear Rose's voice muffled, but clear. "Owen, when I am down here," I shot the padlock off, this time not caring about the noise. The doors flew open and I charged down the stairs to find Rose huddled in the corner, her dress torn and her face bruised. Red rage descended over my vision. I gathered Rose in my arms and carried her up into the light, and over her shoulder I saw Marcus standing by his house, a satisfied smile on his face. He had done this. He had taken my wife and hurt her and thrown her back in the place of her nightmares just to prove he could, and I was going to kill him for it. I carried Rose back to our ranch, my mind a white-hot furnace of rage barely contained beneath a thin shell of control. She clung to me, trembling, her face buried against my shoulder. The bruise on her cheek was already darkening to purple, and I could see finger marks on her arms where Marcus had grabbed her. Inside our house, I settled her gently on the bed and examined her injuries with hands that shook despite my efforts to keep them steady. Nothing broken, thank God, but she had been roughed up badly enough to leave marks. The bastard had hurt her deliberately, knowing exactly what he was doing. "What happened?" I asked, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. Rose took a shuddering breath. "I was making bread. I heard a noise outside and went to check." He grabbed me from behind before I could reach the rifle. Put a cloth over my face with something on it that made everything go dark. When I woke up, I was back in that cellar. "Did he?" I could not finish the question, but Rose understood. "No," she said quickly. "He did not. He just wanted to scare me. He said this was a warning, that next time would be worse unless I left you and came back to him." I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the Garrett Ranch in the distance. My hands were clenched into fists so tight, my knuckles had gone white. "I am going to kill him," I said quietly. Owen Rose started. "No," I cut her off. "Not maybe. Not if I'd have to. I am going to kill Marcus Garrett. Today, right now. Because if I do not, he will never stop. And next time he might do more than just scare you." Rose got up from the bed and came to stand beside me, her hand on my arm. "Then I am coming with you." "No, you stay here where it is safe." "Safe?" Rose's laugh was bitter. "Nowhere is safe as long as he is alive. You said it yourself, so if you are going to do this, we do it together." I looked at her, at the determination in her green eyes, and I knew there was no point in arguing. "All right," I said, "but you stay back. If shooting starts, you get clear." "Understood." "Understood." I loaded my Colt and checked my Winchester. Rose did the same with her rifle. Then we mounted our horses and rode toward the Garrett Ranch together, husband and wife, going to face the devil. Marcus was waiting for us on his front porch, just as I had known he would be. He had his shotgun across his lap and that same satisfied smile on his face. He thought he had won, thought he had broken us. He was about to learn how wrong he was. "Blackwood," he called out as we approached. "Come to see reason, have you?" I dismounted slowly, keeping my hand near my Colt. "I have come to end this," I said. Marcus stood up, the shotgun dangling casually from one hand. "End it. There is nothing to end, boy. Rose belongs to me. She always has. All you have to do is walk away, and this all stops. She belongs to herself," I said. "And she chose me. That is something you will never understand, Garrett. You think you can take what you want, but Rose is not property. She is a person, and she will never choose you." Marcus's smile faded, replaced by cold fury. "Then she will die," he said flatly, "just like Elizabeth died. Just like every woman who has ever denied me what I deserve." Rose spoke up from where she sat on her horse, her rifle across her saddle. "You murdered your wife," she said. "I found her name carved in that cellar. Her warning. And someday, Marcus Garrett, you will answer for it." Marcus laughed, but there was nothing amused in the sound. "Prove it. Prove anything. You are just a hysterical woman making wild accusations. No one will believe you. They will believe the evidence," Rose said. "They will believe Elizabeth's diary." I saw Marcus go very still, saw the calculation in his eyes. "There is no diary," he said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "Isn't there, Rose?" Rose challenged. "Are you sure Elizabeth was a smart woman? Smart enough to document what you were doing to her? Smart enough to hide that documentation where you would never think to look?" It was a bluff. Rose had found Elizabeth's name carved in the wall, but there was no diary that we knew of. But Marcus did not know that, and the seed of doubt had been planted. "Where is it?" Marcus demanded, his voice rising. "What did you do with it?" I smiled cold and hard. "We gave it to Judge Cole," I lied smoothly, "along with sworn testimony about what you did to Rose and what you did to Elizabeth. The law might be slow, Garrett, but it is coming for you." Marcus's face twisted with rage and something else. Fear. For the first time since I had known of his existence, Marcus Garrett was afraid. "You are lying," he said, but he did not sound convinced. "Am I?" I took a step closer. "There is one way to find out. Turn yourself in, face a jury, take your chance with the law." Or Marcus asked. "Or we settle this right here, right now," I said. "Just you and me. Old West justice. A fair fight. Winner takes all." Rose made a small sound of protest behind me, but I did not take my eyes off Marcus. "You challenging me to a duel, Blackwood?" Marcus asked, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was older than me, but he had been on the frontier longer. He probably thought he had the advantage. I confirmed, you and me. Pistols. Whoever walks away wins. Rose goes with the winner. No law involved. No judges or juries. Just two men settling their differences the way men have always done. Marcus considered this for a long moment. Then he set his shotgun aside and unbuckled his gun belt, letting it drop to the porch. He descended the stairs slowly, deliberately, and walked until he was standing about 30 feet from me. "All right, Blackwood," he said. "Let us do this proper. We count to 3. On 3 we draw. First man to shoot wins." I nodded and moved to my position, my hand hanging loose at my side near my Colt. "Rose," I called without looking at her. "Get back. Get clear of the line of fire." I heard her horse move away, heard her dismount somewhere behind me. My entire world had narrowed to Marcus Garrett and the space between us. "On my count," Marcus said. 1. I took a deep breath, forcing my heartbeat to slow. I had done this before in practice, at least. Quick draw competitions in cattle camps. Men showing off their speed. I was fast. But was I fast enough? 2. Marcus counted. Time seemed to slow. I could hear every sound with crystal clarity. The wind rustling through dead grass. A crow calling in the distance. My own breathing steady and calm. 3. Marcus drew before he finished saying the word, his hand flashing to his gun in a move he had probably been planning all along. He was cheating just like he had cheated at everything else in his miserable life. But I was faster. My Colt cleared leather and bucked in my hand before Marcus's gun had fully cleared his holster. The shot echoed across the valley, impossibly loud in the afternoon stillness. Marcus staggered backward, a red flower blooming on his white shirt right over his heart. His gun fell from his hand, unfired. He looked down at the wound, then up at me, his expression one of pure shock. "You," he started, but blood bubbled up in his mouth and cut off whatever he had been about to say. He collapsed to his knees, swayed there for a moment, then fell forward onto his face and did not move again. I stood frozen, the Colt still smoking in my hand, staring at the body of the man I had just killed. My first kill, my only kill if I had my way. And despite everything Marcus had done, despite knowing it had been necessary, I felt the weight of it settle onto my shoulders like a physical thing. Rose ran to me, her arms going around me from behind. "Owen," she said. "Owen, it is over. He is dead. It is over." I turned to her, and she must have seen something in my face because her expression softened. "You did what you had to do," she said firmly. "He was going to kill you. He was going to kill both of us. You saved us." "I killed a man." I said, my voice hollow. "You killed a monster," Rose corrected. "There is a difference." Before I could respond, I heard the sound of horses approaching. I turned my gun still in my hand to see Jack Boone riding toward us. The hired gun I had shot in the shoulder weeks ago now apparently recovered enough to ride. I raised my Colt ready to finish what I had started, but Jack held up both hands in a gesture of surrender. "I am not here to fight," he called out. "I am here because Marcus Garrett owed me $200 for a job I did not finish. And now that he is dead, I figure I am never getting paid." He rode closer, his eyes taking in Marcus's body. "Self-defense?" he asked. "Fair duel," I said. He drew first. I was just faster. Jack nodded slowly. "Then I reckon you did what needed doing." Marcus Garrett was a bastard who had it coming. No skin off my nose. He tipped his hat to Rose. Ma'am, I apologize for any trouble I caused you. I was just following orders and collecting pay. Now that the man who hired me is dead, consider our business concluded. He turned his horse and rode away without looking back, and I realized I was not going to have to kill anyone else today. The relief was almost overwhelming. We need to report this, Rose said quietly, before someone finds the body and jumps to conclusions. I nodded, and together we rode back to Silver Pine. The sun was setting by the time we reached town, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked like fire. Sheriff Wade Harper listened to our story with an expression that gave nothing away. He was a careful man, the sheriff, not quick to judge, but not easy to fool either. When we finished, he sat back in his chair and studied us both. You are saying Marcus Garrett challenged you to a duel, he asked. Other way around, I said. I challenged him. He accepted. It was a fair fight. Any witnesses, Rose, I said. And Jack Boone, though he did not arrive until after. Jack Boone, the gunfighter. The sheriff's eyebrows rose. What was he doing there? Marcus had hired him, I explained. But he left when he realized he was not getting paid. Sheriff Harper drummed his fingers on his desk. I am going to need to see the body, he said. And I am going to need to investigate your story. But between you and me, Blackwood, I have been hearing rumors about Marcus Garrett for years. Nothing I could prove, but enough to make me wonder. If half of what I suspect is true, you probably did this town a favor. I killed a man, Sheriff, I said. That is not something I am proud of. Maybe not, he said, but it is something you will have to live with. Let me do my investigation. If everything checks out the way you say, I will rule it self-defense, and we can all move on with our lives. It took 3 days, but in the end, Sheriff Harper ruled the death of Marcus Garrett a justified homicide in self-defense. There were too many people who had seen the evidence of his crimes, too many whispers about what had happened to his first wife, too much evidence of his harassment of Rose and me. The town breathed a collective sigh of relief when he was buried, and more than one person told me privately that I had done what needed doing. Jack Boone and his brother left the territory that same week. I heard later they had moved on to Wyoming, taking their guns for hire business elsewhere. Without Marcus's money, they had no reason to stay and no desire to tangle with a man who had proven himself willing to kill. But I still saw his face in my dreams sometimes, still felt the weight of his death on my conscience. Rose was right that he had been a monster, but taking a human life, even a monstrous one, changes a man. I had crossed a line I could never uncross, and I would carry that with me for the rest of my days. Still, when I looked at Rose safe and alive and free, I knew I would make the same choice again if I had to. December passed into January, and with the new year came new beginnings. The Garrett Ranch was sold at auction to pay his debts, and I bought it for a fraction of what it was worth. Nobody else wanted land that carried such dark history. While clearing out the main house, Rose found a loose floorboard in what had been Elizabeth's sewing room. Beneath it was a leather journal, its pages filled with Elizabeth's careful handwriting. The diary was real after all. Elizabeth had documented everything. Her words confirmed what we already knew. Marcus Garrett had been a monster long before Rose ever stepped off that train. We gave the diary to Sheriff Harper, and though Marcus was beyond earthly justice, the truth of what he had done was finally known. The first thing I did was tear down that cellar. Rose and I worked together for 3 days, breaking apart the wooden stairs, filling in the earthen pit with dirt and stones. When we were done, we planted rose bushes over the spot where the entrance had been. Nothing evil will ever grow here again, I told Rose as we worked the soil around the new plants. Only beauty. She kissed me, her lips cold from the winter air, and I tasted salt from the tears on her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered, for understanding, for knowing I needed this. In February, Rose realized she was pregnant. She told me one morning over breakfast, her voice casual, as if she was commenting on the weather. I think I am with child, she said. I nearly choked on my coffee. You think I have not had my monthly courses in 2 months, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings. I think that means a baby's coming. I set down my cup very carefully, afraid I might drop it otherwise. When late summer, probably. August or September, I got up and pulled her into my arms, holding her tight enough that she laughed and complained I was squeezing too hard. We are going to have a baby, I said, still not quite believing it. We are, Rose confirmed. Are you happy? Happy? I am terrified. I do not know the first thing about being a father. You will learn, Rose said confidently. the same way we have learned everything else, together. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, it transformed the valley. The roses we had planted over the cellar bloomed in profusion, white and pink and red blossoms that filled the air with perfume. Rose took it as a good sign. She started a school that spring using the old abandoned church on the edge of town. 11 children showed up that first day, ranging from 6 years old to 13. Rose taught them reading and writing and arithmetic, and she loved every minute of it. I would ride into town sometimes just to watch her teach, seeing the way her face lit up when one of her students grasped a difficult concept. She was born to do this, I realized, to shape young minds and give children the education she had fought so hard to get herself. One of her students was the daughter of Ezra Pike, the drunk station clerk who had taken Marcus's bribe and lied about Rose's arrival. Ezra had been fired and was now barely scraping by, but Rose took his daughter anyway and refused to charge him tuition. When I asked her why, she said simply, "The child is not responsible for her father's sins, and she deserves a chance to be better than he was." That was Rose, always seeing the best in people, always willing to give second chances even to those who might not deserve them. Summer arrived with brutal heat, and Rose's pregnancy became obvious. She moved more slowly now, one hand always resting on her swelling belly, but she refused to give up teaching. The children brought her gifts, wildflowers and smooth stones and drawings they had made. She kept them all in the wooden box I had carved for her, treasures from her students that meant more to her than gold. In late August, on a night when the moon hung full and heavy in the sky, Rose's water broke. I had been prepared for this, or at least I thought I had been. But when Rose grabbed my arm and said calmly, "It is time," I felt panic rise in my throat like bile. "I will get the doctor," and they said, already moving toward the door. "No time," Rose said through gritted teeth. "The baby is coming now." "What?" "Now, Owen, help me to the bed." I had delivered calves and foals, had helped animals give birth more times than I could count. But this was different. This was Rose, my wife, my whole world, and she was depending on me to keep her and our child safe. I boiled water and gathered clean cloths, my hands shaking the entire time. Rose lay on the bed, her face pale and sweating, breathing through the contractions that came faster and harder with each passing hour. "Tell me what to do," I said. "Just stay with me," Rose said. "Do not leave me alone." "Never," I promised. The labor went on for 14 hours. 14 hours of watching Rose suffer, of feeling helpless and terrified and desperate. She screamed and cursed and cried, and I held her hand through all of it, whispering encouragement, even as my own fear threatened to drown me. "I can see the head," I said finally, my voice shaking. "Rose, I can see the baby." "Then get ready to catch," Rose gasped and pushed with everything she had left. Our son came into the world screaming his lungs out, red-faced and furious and absolutely perfect. I caught him in shaking hands, this tiny miracle that was half me and half Rose and entirely his own person. "It is a boy," I said, tears streaming down my face. "Rose, it is a boy." Rose reached for him, and I laid our son on her chest. She looked down at him with such pure love that I felt my heart might burst from the force of it. "Hello, Henry," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Henry James Blackwood, born August 27th, 1883. 7 pounds of squalling infant who would grow up to be the finest man I ever knew, second only to his own son. But that night he was just a baby, and I was just a man holding his whole world in his arms. The next months passed in a blur of sleepless nights and dirty diapers and the particular exhaustion that comes with new parenthood. Henry cried constantly those first weeks, his little belly giving him pain that we could do nothing to ease. Rose and I took turns walking him, rocking him, singing to him in voices hoarse from lack of sleep. But there were moments of pure magic too. The first time Henry smiled at us, a real smile that lit up his whole face. The first time he wrapped his tiny hand around my finger and held on tight. The first time Rose fell asleep with him on her chest, both of them peaceful and perfect. Christmas that first year was simple. We had no money for fancy gifts, but I carved a wooden horse for Henry, even though he was too young to play with it. Rose made him a soft blanket from scraps of fabric she had been saving. We hung pine branches around the house and sang carols to our son, and it was the best Christmas of my life. The next spring brought new challenges. A drought hit the valley, and the creek that ran through our land slowed to a trickle. The cattle started dying, and I realized I needed to dig a deeper well if we were going to survive. Rose helped me despite my protests. She would work beside me for hours hauling up buckets of dirt and rock, while Henry napped in a basket nearby. We dug for 2 weeks straight, going deeper and deeper into the earth, praying we would hit water before we ran out of strength. We finally struck water at 90 feet, but the celebration was short-lived. The walls of the well were unstable, and as I was climbing out one afternoon, a section gave way. I fell 30 feet before I hit bottom, landing hard on my left leg. The pain was instantaneous and blinding, and I knew even before I looked that something was badly broken. Owen. Rose's voice came from above, frantic. Owen, can you hear me? I am alive, I called back, though my voice came out weak. But my leg is broken. You are going to have to pull me up. What followed was the most harrowing hour of our marriage. Rose lowered a rope, then ran to the nearest neighbor's farm, the Hendersons, 2 miles east. She returned with Tom Henderson and his 2 grown sons. Between the 3 men working the rope through a pulley Rose had rigged to the well frame, they hauled me up foot by agonizing foot. It took nearly 2 hours, and Rose held Henry the entire time, refusing to look away from the well opening. By the time she got me out, we were both sobbing, and my leg was bent at an angle that made me nauseous to look at. She splinted it with boards from the barn and rode to town for the doctor, while I lay on the floor holding Henry and trying not to scream from the pain. The doctor set the bone and told me I would be off my feet for 6 weeks minimum. 6 weeks of lying in bed while spring work needed doing, while cattle needed tending, while Rose had to do everything herself. But she never complained. She ran the ranch, taught her school, cared for Henry, and nursed me back to health without a single word of resentment. I fell in love with her all over again, watching her strength, her resilience, her absolute refusal to be defeated by circumstance. You saved my life, I told her one night as she changed the bandages on my leg. You saved mine first, Rose replied. We are even. By April of 1884, I was back on my feet and the ranch was thriving. We had 30 head of cattle, 15 acres planted in wheat, and a well that produced clean water year-round. Rose's school had grown to 18 students, and she had hired an assistant teacher to help manage them all. Life was good, hard but good, the kind of good that comes from working for something and building it with your own hands. One evening in late April, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. Henry was asleep inside, worn out from a day of exploring everything he could reach. Rose leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, and I thought about how far we had come from that terrible October day when I pulled her out of a cellar. Do you ever regret it? Rose asked quietly. Answering my letter, marrying me. Everything that came after, not for a single second, I said. You never, Rose said firmly. You gave me a life, Owen, a real life. Not just survival, but and purpose and love. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the cellar, I asked. Even the cellar, she confirmed. Because it led me here. To you. To Henry. To this life we built together. I kissed the top of her head and we sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out over the mountains. We had 37 more years together after that night. 37 years of building a life, raising children, surviving droughts and blizzards, and the 100 small disasters that make up a life on the frontier. We had 2 more children, Margaret and Samuel, and watched all 3 of them grow into fine adults who carried our values forward into the next generation. Rose's school became the Hawthorne Blackwood Academy, a real institution with multiple teachers and a building built specifically for education. She taught until she was 60 years old, shaping the minds of hundreds of children who went on to become teachers and doctors and ranchers and mothers. I expanded the ranch until it covered nearly 1,000 acres, but I never forgot where it started. Never forgot the small house and the 160 acres, and the desperate hope that had brought me west in the first place. And through it all, Rose was beside me. My partner, my love, my reason for everything. I am 65 years old now, sitting on this porch telling my grandson the story of how I met his grandmother. The sun is setting over the same mountains I saw that first day, painting the sky in colors that never get old, no matter how many times you see them. And the most remarkable part, Rose is still here. Still alive, still vibrant, still the woman who refused to give up hope even in the darkest moment of her life. The door behind me opens and Rose steps out, 62 years old, with silver threading through her dark hair. She is still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. Owen Henry Jr., she calls. Come inside for supper. I stand up and take her hand the same way I have been taking it for 39 years. Yes, Mrs. Blackwood, I say, and she smiles. 39 years and you still call me that. 39 more years and I will still call you that, I promise. She laughs and we walk inside together, leaving Henry Jr. to follow. Through the window I can see the rose garden blooming where the cellar used to be, white and pink and red flowers growing from soil that once held only darkness. We turned that darkness into light, Rose and I. We took the worst thing that ever happened to us and built something beautiful from it. And that, I think, is what a life well lived looks like. The mail-order bride who refused to down, and the cowboy who heard her cry for help. We found each other in the darkest moment, and we held on tight through everything that came after. We built a legacy of love that will outlast us both, and I would not change a single moment of it.